Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast, the resource for transitional and experienced genealogists who want to create a successful business. I'm your host, Miriam Pierre-Louis. Here you'll learn from professionals all around the world who work in the field of genealogy. Are you ready to get started? Then let's get going. Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast. Today we head to Germany to chat with genealogist Andrea Bentschneider. Andrea, welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Andrea, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and give us an overview of your genealogy business?
Sure. I'm 45 years old and I was born and raised and still live in Hamburg, Germany, and spent 10 years in New York in the 90s. So that was an exciting time. But that was basically my time before I did genealogy. I started my business in 2004 and by the name of Beyond History. And with that basically started fulfilling a dream of mine. And I see my business, yes, I do offer genealogy services and help people with their genealogy questions, but I find that I actually help them fulfill their life dreams, because many of my clients come to me and we are able to help them answer questions of issues that were long on their mind and resolve stories that were going on in the family. So that's what it really makes it so rewarding. And again, it's been 10 and a half years now. I have a little team around me. We're 5 people by now, and we're just excited to offer services for genealogy related throughout all of Germany and also the former Eastern provinces, which is nowadays Poland and Russia.
So Andrea, this is really interesting, the way you say that you are making people's life dreams happen. I love that concept. I love that phrase. Can you give me an example of somebody's life dream, a client's dream, and how you were able to help them fulfill that?
It's like one of the questions that we try to answer or find answers for is generally related to the Second World War. What did my grandfather do, or what did my father do? There are all these rumors about that. And so obviously we're trying to shed a light on that. And some of the answers may be good, some of them may be bad. But generally people are just satisfied to finally know what went on there. And another example, which is always really great, is if we find living relatives for people. If it's either someone where like even within Germany, due to the reunification, families went into different directions and the contact was lost, and we help reunite them again. Or even if we have the family from Australia where the ancestor emigrated, let's say, in the 1890s, and we managed to find living relatives of them. And so this is always what is very fulfilling. So to be part of this, to even sometimes be present at the time when the members of the families meet for the first time again. So that is very rewarding.
So it sounds like what you're doing is bringing your clients closure, whether it's related to World War II or whether it's the reunification. You're giving people that sense of satisfaction and knowing that they have found the answer that they're looking for. That's a really wonderful, wonderful thing.
That's well put. Thank you. I will take that for my notes and keep that in mind to say that. Yes, absolutely.
Well, please do. And it is a wonderful service that you're doing. And I'm so happy that you're thinking in the terms beyond genealogy. You're not just providing them with a piece of paper that has names and dates on them. You're providing something much more meaningful, much more emotional, something that has a tremendous impact on their life. And I think all genealogists really would do themselves a good service to think of what they do more in those terms. So I'm so happy to hear you thinking this way, because with the service you're doing, you are actually transforming people's lives. You're using genealogy as your tool, and then you're helping them find the answers they need. Love that.
Yes, and for me it was always, and that's why it shows this name for the company, Beyond History. So it's and yes, it is great if I find the birth date and the name and the birthplace of the 4 times great-grandfather. But at the end of the day, I'm actually more keen on finding out what were the living conditions at that time. What did it look like? What did it mean to have the profession that he had? What were the circumstances? Why did someone choose to immigrate? And what was related to that? What did it feel like? And what was the experience to be an immigrant on a vessel going to Australia in the 1860s, where it sometimes took 120 days to sail from Hamburg to Australia. So, and that's what I'm always looking at. And unfortunately, sometimes my clients aren't as interested in that information as I am. So obviously it's always like walking a fine line, but that was basically my intention when I started. And that's what I'm really interested in, to bringing the one story, the family story, into the broad context of the history that was going on around the time that they lived at a certain place.
And what you just said there, I think, is so important. What you said, what you want to do and how it may differ slightly from your client, I think it's absolutely critical that we as professionals understand what we want to provide as a service. I think sometimes genealogy professionals focus so much on the client and they forget about putting themselves into the broader picture. And I think it's critical as we mature as genealogists to understand that what we want as providers of this service. And then we need to communicate that so that we get more clients that are fulfilling our needs and what our interests are, and so that we can give them better service because they're in sync with what we're providing, and we know that that's what they really want. So that's great to hear you articulating these thoughts. It's really, really good. And, I would encourage everyone to think about what is it that you really want to do and think about how can you get more clients. You can't always get the perfect client, but how can you get more clients that fit with what you want to accomplish? So thank you for mentioning that.
And certainly at the beginning, I often had the case that there was this really interesting family story that I researched for a client, and there was so much more to be found out. And the client just didn't want it. And then I went on and researched it on my own because I was just so curious about how it would go on and how it would all resolve. So obviously I don't do this anymore because now I'm in the lucky position to have enough projects going on that it's actually almost difficult for me to juggle all of them and to get them all into my work days. This is also this working on the context and looking at the big picture is also something that I'm in a lucky position to be working for many of the Who Do You Think You Are productions in various countries and various continents. And so these productions or these research projects really give me the opportunity to do this and to really find out about certain historical issues that I never ever would have dreamed of that I would come anywhere near them when I started doing genealogy like 10, 20 years ago. So now all of a sudden I'm an expert on musical history in a certain part of northern Germany. What happened there in the 17th, 18th century with regard to the musicians in that area. Or like I know things about astronomy in the 16th century in Germany. Again, it's like doesn't belong to the everyday work of a genealogist, but it just is so fulfilling to really have the possibility to learn more and more every day as I go along here. So it never gets boring, it's never the same. And so that's why it's just such a pleasure to have this profession.
Well, I think that more people should focus on the context and on these things that you talk about that you enjoy so much. I think it's a much richer and fuller picture of the past beyond just the names and the dates. I think when you have a lot of experience with genealogy, and I think for newer genealogists, they don't have as much chance to pick and choose the way you can now. So I just want to say to them, get your experience, and through time you will get more projects and you'll be able to pick and choose and really go for those projects that are going to allow you a meatier chance to show what you like to do. And the who do you think you are? Wow, that's just a great opportunity for on so many different levels, because not only are you getting to do interesting projects, but you're also having the phenomenal opportunity to learn to interface with a different type of client, and especially one that's in the media and one that's in television, has different kinds of deadlines than a normal person would. And there's a different goal with what they're trying to accomplish. Can you talk a little bit about how working for Who Do You Think You Are is different than working for a private client?
Well, yeah, again, it is, Who Do You Think You Are research usually begins with the interest in the family story of the person whose family is being researched there. But once interesting stories about the professions of certain ancestors or historical involvements in historical events become clear, then you stop basically the genealogical research and you start going into the history and the context. And then you begin talking to experts like professors at universities who have this expertise in that specific field. You start looking into literature, and that is just all of a sudden there is basically the interest in looking at as many sources as possible to shed a light on this particular historical context that the production company is interested in. And sometimes it gets to be very tedious because you think, like, I've read 300 letters of this person. If I read 5 more of these letters, they won't make a difference of what we know about the person already. And yet, for the production companies, it is important. So it is very involved. It is very time-consuming. You are very much on a deadline. Preferably, you have to present everything yesterday. And yet, at least in Germany, it is very interesting and also very rewarding to work on TV projects or also for any kind of media, because basically archives and the authorities, everyone works a lot faster than they usually do. If you say, I'm working for television, you get copies of documents within a week, where you normally wait for over a year to get the same document. So obviously, with that, you also have much more possibilities to come up with results in a shorter time.
Is there a little residual benefit once you start contacting an archive and you say, well, I'm doing this research for a television show? Afterwards, when you're back to doing regular projects, I would imagine that you still have a little bit of an advantage because they know that the potential is there, that you're working with high-profile clients.
Absolutely. And I think it's been like 3 or 4 different episodes now in the various countries where Who Do You Think You Are is being produced, with whom I went to the military archive in Berlin. And I've seen places of their storage which I believe like no normal researcher would ever see. And so I have my contacts and I know who to call if I have a special question. And so obviously they know me, that I work with integrity, and I always make sure, and that's also probably one of the best advices that I can give, is always treat the persons at the administrational offices or at the archives really well, because you may need to work with them again. And it's like, I make sure to call ahead and speak with them and then place my order and then call them afterwards again, so they are treated like a person from me. And I make sure that all my staff does the same thing. So we only have very good relationships to civil registry offices, archives, etc. And so that obviously makes our life a lot easier. And so the same applies, like I get to be in touch with people at archives that I usually would not contact if I just had a simple request. When I called for a TV program, then I would call the director's office. And so obviously I'm known then in that archive. And so usually it does help afterwards because I know what they have at the archive and I have the contacts there. And usually things are easier then.
That's a really, really great suggestion. And I think it applies to all genealogy professionals, whether they're working for TV shows or they're just doing local projects or even just lookups and short-term projects. The key there is the relationship building. And relationship building pays off in dividends at the end. If you take the time to cultivate the relationships wherever you go, you will have this benefit that Andrea is talking about. That's really, really, really great advice. I'm so happy that you brought that up because I think it's critical for all genealogy professionals. It's a small thing to do, but it's so easy to forget. Yet that's something that will really help your business a lot.
Particularly in Germany, state employees tend to be rather difficult to deal with. And I see that many people approach them with, you have to give this information to me. And yes, they do have to give it, but I can also ask about it in a nice way, not in a demanding way. And that's the difference, basically.
Now, you talked about the immigrant's story, for example, going to Australia on a 120-day journey. Now, you've had the immigrant experience as well. You went to New York. You spent 10 years in the United States. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, my journey certainly didn't take 120 days. It was more like a plane ride of 6 or 7 hours from Hamburg to New York. But I went there in September 91 and stayed until September 2001. And that was all still the time of my, as I call it, former life when I worked in the hotel and travel industry. And basically, that's also where I got my start in beginning with genealogy as a hobby at that time. When I think it was 1992, I received an email from a man called Stephen Snyder, and he lived in Michigan, and he said, I know every Benschneider in North America. Who are you and are we related? And so that was basically that got me started into looking into my own family history. I had a bit of an interest about that before, but had never done anything about it. And so this was really what triggered me to start looking. And because there aren't so many people with the name, the way how my last name is spelled in Germany. Actually, at that time, there were only 10 people with that name in all of Germany. So I never had taken into consideration that people with my last name could be living somewhere else outside of Germany. So I had never thought of this concept of how people came to America, this whole immigration issue. So it was really interesting for me. And that's how I got more and more involved. I started organizing family events from New York where I had cousins taking notes and asking the relatives to collect any information they had on the family, to bring old photos, to bring old certificates, anything that existed in the family already. My cousins collected them and sent them to me in New York. And I started going to the family history centers and started the research there. And then more and more of my friends, New Yorker friends with German ancestry, they started asking me and I started helping them. And so that's kind of how it all got started. And so then again, it's like I returned to Hamburg in 2001, worked some more in the travel business. And then in 2004, I decided now it's time to do my own thing or to actually follow my dream.
It's so fascinating to me that this one random event from this man contacting you is what got you interested in genealogy and family history.
And it was actually, to complete this, 10 years later, by sheer coincidence in an archive in Mecklenburg, Germany, I found a file, and that was the document that proved that Stephen and I are actually related. Oh. So I now do have a lot of American relatives who I actually, with the exception of Stephen, never met so far. But still, I'm in touch with some of them via Facebook, etc.
Oh, that's so funny. I was going to ask you if you had found a connection to the United States. So there were some Benschneiders who left Germany and settled in America.
Right.
Do you know if they settled in one particular area? Where did they go in America? Just curious.
They went to Ida in Monroe County, Michigan.
Okay, interesting.
And it was actually interesting because here in Germany, they were just like really day laborers, so the lowest level of farm workers that you could have on a northern German farm, basically. And there they went and they started the Lutheran congregation there, and they were very active members there in that town. So that's really great, that the courage that it took for them to go there and then to really build something up and to shape something and not to be reliant on saying like, oh, and this is my life and I stick it out. No, they went and they changed it and made a big difference.
Now, you had mentioned that you were in the hospitality business, working in a hotel in New York. I think that's probably a pretty good business to be in before you do any other type of business. What do you think some of the skills are and some of the benefits are that you took from that experience, and how did it help you when you opened your genealogy business?
Well, one of the hotels I worked in New York was the St. Regis Hotel, so we're talking like deluxe hotels. And so definitely it's the customer service that I learned there. And so to the extent that I can compare my services to those of my colleagues here, I would think that we tend to do more customer service or are more customer service oriented than probably the majority of my colleagues here. But it's more because they don't know it. Since I spent 10 years in New York, I know what the American customer is expecting, and we can deliver that. And it doesn't take much, but it's just like we do have the special knowledge of like, how does an American client tick? What do they want? And how do we deliver something and how do we communicate something? And so I think that may also be a little bit of a difference or our advantage here.
Can you give me an example of how an American client would differ from a German client or maybe even a Canadian client? What are the considerations that you have to keep in mind?
Put it that way, the Americans tend to be much more polite, more friendly. You cannot have like enough polite ways or sentences in your emails, while Germans are more matter of fact, strictly down to business, and that's it, not a sentence or a word too much. And why should I like wish someone a nice day or thank someone for sending a payment because that's their job to do it, kind of. And so I guess that's the difference, just like knowing like the more, in a way, informal way, but yet also, I think, much more polite way of interacting with one another that is common in North America versus in Europe or Germany in particular.
I mean, it's a very real thing, national cultural identities. And I know that there are books, business books, on understanding people from each country. And so it's just kind of fun, actually, to hear that. My impression is that Americans are very open, and they probably definitely talk more and share more than most other people in the world. But it's fun to hear it from a perspective of somebody who's not American.
With some of our clients, in particular, actually American clients, we have in the meantime, very personal relationships already. So it's like, at the end, I know their ancestors better than my living relatives, honestly. And so since I have some projects going on for 6, 7 or more years, or we have clients that we research for, and then there's a 3-year break, and then they come back, and then we continue. So it's really, it's like an ongoing relationship, and in some cases it goes on for many years, and it involves like sending each other Christmas gifts or birthday gifts, or etc. So that's also what makes it really rewarding, that it's not just you deliver something and you don't even get a thank you, but it's like really this personal interaction and this private contact also is also another nice way of being acknowledged for the work that we do.
Well, I think going back to what you said at the very beginning, when you're providing a life-transforming service, I think that emotional element comes into it more, and it's something that the client maybe wants to maintain that relationship with you because of that.
Mm-hmm.
You had talked about getting interested in genealogy when you were in New York. Tell us about when you got back to Germany and you decided to open a business doing this. What kind of transformation did you have to go through from a hobby genealogist into a professional genealogist? What did you have to learn? What was different about being in a business? How did you handle things differently?
So what I did early on is like one of the challenges in German genealogy is that there's a number of different old German scripts in which letters or documents were written. So the first challenge is to learn, like reading the old words, the old letters that were written, basically, and that can be quite challenging, and particularly also for people from abroad. So it's not just the language barrier, it's also actually the script area of documents that you're dealing with. So that was one of the first things that when I knew I was becoming serious about opening my own business, that I really got into teaching myself these old handwritings so that I knew I can write them, and that means I can read them also without any question. And of course, there are certain handwritings that I cannot decipher, and I have a number of colleagues or friends that I can just like send documents by and run them by them, and we try to help each other decipher certain words. But other than that, that was one of the most important parts. The second one was that, well, I was in a lucky position that over the 16 years that I worked in various positions, whether in New York or in Hamburg, I worked in customer service areas, but I also worked in the marketing department. I had many ideas that way already, and I saw what worked for others and what didn't work. One of the things for me was always important from the very beginning that I had a good website and a brochure, so that I had something that I could present to people. I wasn't really up and running yet, and I didn't have much of an idea at the beginning of how I would present my results or any of that. But I had a good website from the very beginning on. So something that I could refer to and something that would be up to the standard that I decided what I want to offer, that to really have I tend to be a perfectionist, so things have to be good, and I wanted to offer a certain standard in service. And so this website and the flyer, the brochure that I had was a reflection of that. And then many of the things actually I really learned as I went along. It's like at the beginning I took orders from people where I just had an email address and a name, and I went and traveled to other cities to do research. And then when it came to them paying an invoice, it's like I never saw any money. So obviously I learned from those experiences. And then after a while, I didn't do anything without a full address. And then I started taking deposits. And so it still is a process as we go along, even 10.5 years later. It's like every time there's something that doesn't work, we look at, okay, what works, what doesn't work at the end of the year. And then we see how can we change it and adjust it so that it works both for the clients but also for us.
When you first started your business, did you know that you were going to target clients in America or Canada or Australia? Did you know exactly who you would be doing genealogy research for?
When I started, there was basically, in my opinion, no market in Germany, so it was clear for me that I would target to the North American market, because that's what I knew there. That's where I had the most contacts to. So I was surprised when I actually started getting inquiries from Germany also. So at the beginning, I wrote a business plan where I had a listing of like what are my contacts, where could I place ads, or which archives would I contact and tell them that I'm on the market now offering certain services. Well, and it was easy because for many years I had gone to certain archives here because I was doing my personal genealogy, so they knew me already. So it was easy for me then to go to the archivist and say, okay, and now as of next month or since last month, I'm doing it professionally, so you know me. And if you have anyone who needs assistance in Hamburg or anything, just please recommend me. Here's my business card, here's my flyer, and that's it. I'm here, and please help me. So that's basically how I got started. And one of my biggest fears was actually like, how would anyone find me? And my biggest fear was I would never have a client. So that was interesting. And the first day that I worked, I actually started my computer that morning on July 1st, 2004, and had 3 inquiries. And until now, I do not know where 2 of them came from. So that was really a nice way to start.
When you started early on, you said you had the website and you contacted these archivists to let them know you were in business. Where did your earliest, say the first 6 months of your business, where did those clients come from? Were they all coming through the website and the archives, or did you start to do other things to let people know that you were doing this?
Well, I had good contacts to Ellis Island, and since in the beginning, one of the major research offers that I had was really doing this research in the Hamburger passenger lists. So obviously there was a very strong advantage to be here, right? Like having these passenger lists in front of my nose. And so I had these contacts to Ellis Island with their research center. And so they referred inquiries to me. They used to be in Hamburg, there used to be the Historic Immigration Office, and they closed half a year before I started my business, and I knew the owner. And so she gave me a lot of her material that she had. She shared a lot of the knowledge with me. She was like kind of my mentor. And also when she still received any inquiries, she would pass them on to me. And so many people came and asked her for help, and she's like, I'm not in business anymore, go to Andrea and she will help you. And so that way I got introduced to many people, and out of that came sometimes very long-standing work and business relationships that sometimes still go on.
Now, at some point you transitioned from being what we call a sole proprietor, working strictly for yourself, and now you have a 5-person firm. Talk about that transition with bringing on additional people, and how has your role changed within the company as a result of having these other employees? Do you have to handle more managerial tasks now because you need to supervise what the other people are doing?
Yeah, I started out in my apartment in the small room with a small desk in the corner. And then after about 2.5, 3 years, the German version of Who Do You Think You Are was prepared for the German market, for the German TV program. And with that, all of a sudden, I got so busy. And it turned out that I spent like 7 to 10 hours a day just doing all these administrational stuff, like from, I don't know, taxes and dealing with insurances and answering inquiries and all these things. So I had almost a whole workday behind me before I could start doing the first work where I actually would get paid for. And so I realized that wasn't going so well, so that wasn't really effective. And so that's when actually my husband joined. And so he was working as an administrative clerk in another company, and basically everything that he did there was what I needed help with. So he was like my first employee. And then we started like moving from the small room, and I took over the living room. And then we had the next employee join us 5.5 years ago, and she's still with us. And then so like it grew and it became more, and with more publicity and with more projects, so there was the need for more staff. And yes, I'm dealing more with marketing issues, website issues, and managerial issues nowadays that I actually would like to, and I miss not having so much time to actually do the research and to be out in the archives, and that I cannot devote as much time to that as I would like to, because I feel like at times I'm not really doing what I want to do, because genealogy is really my passion, and yet there's so much other stuff that gets in the way of it.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the drawbacks of success. When you do succeed, you become well known, you're in demand, your company grows, you hire employees. It's inevitable, unfortunately, that you get pulled away from strictly focusing on what you love to do. But it's just the maturation of a company. It's just, unfortunately, what you have to go through. Maybe someday you'll hand off all the managerial things to somebody else and you'll just become a researcher again. But I think it's going to be a while before you do that.
Yeah, and it's also difficult to actually find the right stuff. Because like in Germany, you tend to have like a 3-year apprenticeship for everything, or you study something. But since genealogy is not a profession that you can learn anywhere, so you just learn it by doing. And so I find that if I hire someone who's never done anything in that area of genealogy, it literally takes 6 to 9 months until the person is fully equipped and trained to handle their own cases and to really be of service 100%. And so that is a lot of time. And obviously when I pay salaries, it also is a lot of money that I have to invest. And so then it's a shame if it doesn't work out, or if the person leaves after they are trained, etc. So that really makes it difficult. But I think now I'm knocking on wood here, in a lucky position to have found a great team. So I hope that with that, some of the managerial things that I need to still take care of right now will become less and less as we have the team and everyone more in their positions.
Here in the United States, a big part of being a genealogy professional is doing volunteer work as well as doing paid client work. And part of that is just volunteering for organizations or for conferences, things like that, as a way of networking and getting your name out there, things like that. In Germany, is volunteering even a possibility, especially given that you're so busy? And secondly, when it comes to networking, is it possible to do that with other genealogists in Germany?
Well, obviously, I would love to volunteer more of my time to the Hamburg Genealogical Society than I get a chance to. But the thing where I do volunteer is that in 2013, I took over the position as chairwoman of the Association of German-speaking Professional Genealogists. And so with that, our association is here to really keep up the standards of a professional genealogy very high and to make sure that all the members adhere to them. And we have exams if you want to join our association. And so that's really, like, I see my role there also as really represent the genealogy business, as making it more popular, but also making sure that not just like trying to avoid, or I don't know if you can say avoid, but just like really making sure that there's a high standard and that that we're doing ethical work in this field.
Andrea, can you tell us what the most fun project is that you've ever worked on that you can share with us?
Well, the most fun project, it started out with this midwife from the city of Dresden who had 7 illegitimate children. One of her sons immigrated to the U.S. and became a pastor, I think. And so they wanted to, his granddaughters wanted to know who was the father, etc. So it turned out that before she was a midwife, she was at one point in her early life an actress in Hamburg. And the father of her 7 children was a theater director in Hamburg. And for the first 2 children, she still lived in Hamburg. For the other 5 children, they traveled between Dresden and Hamburg up and down the Elbe River. Meanwhile, what was so interesting is that the director was married the whole time to another woman and had children with her after a while, I think I found a total of 7 other women with whom he had children. So I currently know of, like in a 40-year time frame where he had fathered, I think 15, 20, more than 20 children to 8 different women. And what makes the whole thing very funny is there was a book written about the theater, the St. Pauli Theater, where he was the director, and there was a whole chapter devoted to him. And he was known for his firm and strong moral standards, and that he would fire his theater staff if they had illegitimate children, outer marriage affairs, etc. So it was so funny to see, like, yet the life that he was leading, and meanwhile, like, what he expected of the people who worked for him. So, and I'm sure there are many more children out there, and I still haven't found them yet, though.
That is so funny, so ironic. That would make such a great DNA case study in Germany. Like if you could identify 1 or 2 of the children, and yes. And you know, especially if you could do, you know, carry down through the Y DNA through the male line, and then, you know, just through random DNA testing, see how many matches you could get to this man. That would be so funny to figure that out.
With most of these illegitimate children in Hamburg, I was just purely lucky because although he wasn't married to the mothers of the children, they still had his last name. So I don't even want to know how many other children are out there who never had his last name, so I will never even know that they are his children because they went by their mother's names, you know. So there are probably many more out there.
Wow. I've never heard of a case like that. That is definitely one of the most fascinating cases I've ever heard.
And it's so great because it shows that, like, for genealogy, it's like sometimes also great to leave the normal beaten path with just looking into civil records or church books, but also by, like, who knew that in this history of the theater I would find something about this man that would give away so much of his character and what kind of a person he was like. So that was very interesting.
All right, Andrea, the time has come to enter the lightning round. I am going to pepper you with a bunch of rapid questions, and you're going to hit us with some great advice for all the people listening, okay?
Okay.
What was the one thing you were most afraid of in starting your business?
Again, that nobody would find me. I would sit here with my great idea and I would have no clients.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Shit happens, and that still cannot prevent you from being successful.
Somebody told you that?
Yes. That was after I posted something on a mailing list that was supposed to be meant for one person, and it went to everyone on the mailing list. And then I got these really bad answers back for doing that. So, and that was an advice that my business coach gave me.
Okay. What is one specific action listeners can take in the next 24 hours to help them transition into a genealogy career?
Well, one great thing that I did was I joined APG, so that was a great thing. But basically just like know what your strengths are and know where your clients are. So it's like look into that and prepare yourself in that way. What
is your preferred social media channel?
Well, I do Facebook, I do LinkedIn, but I'm just not so sure if that is really where I get clients. So it's more like I see it more for entertaining purposes than not as a marketing tool, really, I think. So, but I would say Facebook.
Where do you get most of your clients today? Where do they come from? Your website?
Still from the website, through recommendations and, media, articles in the newspapers.
If you can recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be?
One of my favorite ones is Who Moved My Cheese by Kenneth Blanchett, about dealing with changes in your life.
And one of the great things about Who Moved My Cheese is that it's a really quick and easy read. So people don't have to worry about picking up another book and not being able to get through it. You can probably get through it in a day or two.
And you can read it every couple of months because every time you have different things going on in your life, and it still will give you insights every single time you read it again.
All right, we have a segment now called Tips from the Pros, with you being the pro. And I think for your question, I would like it if you could give 3 tips about how genealogy professionals can learn to work with clients from another country. So they don't have to be German and the clients don't have to be American. Just in a broad sense, if your clients come from another country, 3 quick tips on how to approach that and how to make the most of it so that you can be successful getting clients.
Well, generally, I was in a lucky position that in my time in New York at the St. Regis Hotel, I went through like cross-cultural training. And I was exposed to many cultures there. So for me, I guess like it was somewhat easy to adapt to certain different mentalities. And I guess like one of the things that always helps is if you have a bit of knowledge of a language or just know a little bit of the expectations that the client may have. And sometimes I find like if you just even write one sentence on the bottom about wishing someone a nice day in their own language, they appreciate it and it gives a little bit of personal touch also. And in terms of finding clients, well, one thing that we did is like we found over the years that we had many customers from South America who were looking to obtain the German citizenship. And so we approached different embassies of the countries where and told them like we exist. And if you have anyone in your country who want to have the German citizenship, we can help them get the necessary documentation here in Germany. So please recommend us. That worked for a while. And then after a while, it got difficult because German state agencies are not allowed to suggest or refer to a specific company, but for the time being, it worked well. And otherwise, it's just like, I guess, look at what are the major genealogical societies in that country. How can you get in touch with them? Possibly write articles in their newsletters. That's basically what I would like. Parts of these steps I've used, or that's what I would do if I had more time. Let's put it that way.
Andrea, give our audience one parting piece of advice and then tell us how we can get in contact with you.
Okay. Really, I guess the most important part is to really know who are your clients and what are their expectations, and to communicate with them clearly so that there's no upset in between what you deliver and what they think they're getting for their money and what they're expecting to be receiving. You can get in contact through my website, and that's beyond-history.com. So the company is Beyond History in Hamburg, Germany.
Andrea Bentschneider, thank you so much for coming on the Genealogy Professional Podcast today.
Thank you so much.
What a great discussion from Andrea Bentschneider. It just goes to show that genealogy professionals all around the world deal with some of the same issues, such as client expectations. One of the things I loved about this discussion was when Andrea mentioned that she sees her business as fulfilling life dreams. So she's doing more than just genealogy. And she felt so strongly about that she named her business Beyond History to show that she's going beyond history with what she's doing. And I think that's a really great thing that maybe all of us could think about. What is the end impact that we're having on our clients? Another thing that was discussed was what the client wants versus what the researcher wants. For instance, if a client is just looking for names and dates and a researcher wants to go deeper than that or has a different angle on the research. Of course, if you accept a client, you need to deliver what the client wants. That goes without saying. The point of entertaining the thought about what the client wants versus what the researcher wants is all about your growth as a genealogy professional. What types of clients do you have right now? What are they asking you for? And then think about, well, what do you want? And does that line up with what your clients are asking you to do? And if not, then maybe you should think about in the future, as you grow and gain more experience, you have to reach a certain level in your business in order to do this. You want to strive to find the clients that are fulfilling what you need as a researcher. So it's not just about doing what a client wants, any client wants. It's about growing in your business and becoming choosier and really going after the kind of clients that you want. Sometimes people use certification or accreditation as a means to achieve that because once you become certified or accredited, you can be choosier about the clients that you take because of this credential that you have. So keep that in mind. That's one way that you can achieve that sort of result. Another point that Andrea made was to treat people well. And I would love to just emphasize that. And it's not even just about genealogy. It's a really good business tactic. It's a really good life tactic. Treat people well, and they will always respond well to you. So if you're going to an archive, call ahead. It's something so simple. But when was the last time you called ahead to some place? Maybe for a lot of you, that was fairly recent, but hopefully. But it's a simple thing. But think about it. Consciously think about, how can I really serve not just my clients, but the people that are part of my work life, my colleagues, the people who work in repositories, my mentors, people who work in societies, people who run conferences. Think about how you can treat them better, more thoughtfully by anticipating, calling ahead, making what they have to do easier. And that is really going to set you apart. And people are going to respond to that, and you will get opportunities as a result. So this falls under the larger umbrella of building relationships, and it's really important to build relationships for the long term, not for the short term. And, we're all prone to not always maintaining things. I mean, I will be the first to admit that I do this too. You interact with somebody and you think, well, I'll probably not interact with them again, or maybe not for a really long time. But pretend that everybody that you interact with is somebody that's going to be a part of your life for your lifetime, and treat them really well, like they're going to be somebody you're going to need in the future. And just imagine how wonderful that is going to impact how they treat you in return. So just some food for thought from this particular discussion with Andrea Bentschneider. I really hope that this discussion made you think about your own business with some of the things that she was saying. Let's get on to some news items. I am going to be starting a series of free webinars on October 13th, 2015. That's a Tuesday, and that's the first one is going to be that day at 12 noon. And the topic for these webinars, these 3 webinars that I'm going to do, is going to be social media. So on October 13th, we'll do a webinar on Twitter. And then on the 20th, we'll do a webinar on Facebook pages. And then on the 27th, we'll do a webinar on Google+. And some of the neat things that you can do with Google Plus these days. And these webinars are geared towards people who are confused about social media. So if you're a social media pro, don't waste your time with this. This is really for people. We're going to start fresh, right, with making an account and try to give you some understanding of what the heck is going on with these different social media sites and how you can use them and why you should use them. That's going to be about the point for this. Anybody can sign up for this, so you can be a genealogy professional. You could tell your friends who are accountants. It doesn't matter. From my experience talking to genealogy professionals, I know that one of the biggest frustrations they have is with social media. And I feel this is a gap that I can step in and try to help people with. So October 13th, 20th, and 27th, and that's at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm not sure exactly when the time changes. Maybe it's Eastern Daylight Time for all 3 of those dates, but I'm not sure. When I create the webinars and go to webinar, it will automatically be sorted out by their system. So don't worry about that. So when you sign up, it'll have the right time. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I'm going to do in October is a webinar practicum. And this is going to be a paid event. This is $49, and this is for people who either are presenters now or they would like to be, and they're either not comfortable with doing webinars or they've never done it before. So what this is going to involve is a 1-hour lecture plus questions, a half hour for questions and such, on Friday, October 23rd at 12 noon, again, Eastern Daylight Time. I believe it's still daylight time at that point. And we'll have the webinar section right then. We're going to go over everything to do with webinars from all point of view, from the equipment that you need, from how to use GoToWebinar to how to make a good presentation. And then, this is what makes it the practicum part, after that, you will have a one-on-one appointment with me, and we will actually record a webinar for you. So you'll have a 1-hour session to learn what it's all about. And then later, at a date of your preference, we will record, you and me, and we will actually take you through the motions, and you can create a webinar. And this will give you experience using webinar software. And the end result will actually also be a webinar that you can send to different organizations if they need to see a sample of what you're like. So that will be Friday, October 23rd, and that will be $49. And there will be a link in the show notes if you would like to sign up for that. Now, of course, I cannot let you go without doing an action item. It's been a while since you've had an action item, so I need to give you a good one here to make you think a little bit. I want to go back to what I first said about Andrea's mission of fulfilling life dreams. I want you to think about your business, how your services impact the life of the people that you serve, beyond just providing them with names and dates. How does what you do on a daily basis change the lives of the people that you are working for? So I'm going to give you a couple examples that are not genealogy related, just kind of give you a little bit of food for thought. So Nike's mission statement, you know Nike, the athletic company, their mission statement is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And their definition of athlete is anyone who has a body. So even I would qualify as an athlete. So that's a pretty broad mission statement. And again, I'm just giving you this to kind of get you to think beyond the actual tasks that you do for people and think more about how what you do changes people's lives. All right. And then IKEA, it's not worded very smoothly, but their statement is to make everyday life better for the many people. And I think by the many people, they mean the everyday person, the majority. So they're a furniture company, but their mission statement is to make every day better for everybody. Isn't that great? I mean, so think about that. So what are you doing when you are finding people's ancestors? Are you making life better for these people that you're serving? And then JetBlue is the final one here, and that is their mission statement is to bring humanity back to air travel. It's pretty broad, though they keep it specific to air travel as opposed to broadly covering everything. So those three statements plus think about Andrea and her fulfilling people's life dreams and how she tied that into her company name, Beyond History. So your action item is think about your company and come up with some kind of statement. Even if you don't share it with anybody, you don't have to share this with anybody. Just figure out what are you actually doing when you do your work. That's what I want you to think about this month. I think it'll really help you grow, make you think about your company in a different way. Anyways, until next time, so long. The Genealogy Professional Podcast is a production of Fieldstone Common Media. Executive producer, Marianne Pierre-Louis. Creative producer, George Edwards. Technical director, Jean-Luc Pierre-Louis Jr.